Welcome to the Our Ability Podcast. It's November 18th, 2024. We're excited to be back with you talking about the future of disability. And I'm the host, John Robinson. I'm glad to be back. Last week, we talked about the future of disability, and we talked specifically about post-election, where we're going, what we're going to become, and what the ramifications are. And today, I want to talk a little bit along those same lines, but I want to talk about digital accessibility. I think this is extremely important to be talking about digital accessibility at a time when we're creating more digital spaces, more apps, more web pages, more documents, and it's all converging with new laws that are in place coming in 2026 that will have ramifications for all of us that receive, any of us that receive federal funds, any local, regional, state agency that receives federal funds, any federal agency or federal contractor. So we're going to talk about digital accessibility in a way that I hope makes some sense to all of you. And I want to talk specifically about checking accessibility and what is your personal experience. We recently did a webinar that was available through Syracuse University. It's one of a series of webinars that we're going to be doing around digital accessibility, and it made me think about it'd be a good opportunity for us to talk about the future of digital accessibility as it manifests and how it can help all of us that are either business owners or that receive federal funds as a federal contractor, subcontractor, and as I said, as an agency of some kind. So first of all, want to ask you to think about what your experience is in digital accessibility. And accessibility comes in many shapes and forms. You may create documents, you may create web pages, you may be involved in that, and you may think that you're compliant, but you may not be. Certainly you may know about alt text, you may know about how you set up headers, you may know that to click the check accessibility button in Microsoft. Most Microsoft tools have a review and or a check accessibility button. So that may be an experience that you're used to. But if you're not, we want to walk you through the whys of that and the hows of that, and then what we can do beyond Microsoft tools into other tools to make sure that your digital footprint is accessible. And so the beginning of that conversation on checking accessibility is why. And the why is, in essence, ableism. What we're trying to do is to understand ableism at its core, and can we remove some of the barriers that have created ableism. Ableism is intentional or unintentional forms of discrimination against individuals with disabilities in thought, word, and deed is the way that I would put it. And so it can be, if you think about what I just said, intentional or unintentional forms of discrimination in thought, word, and deed come into unintentional consequences by an inaccessible web space, document, web page, etc., that wasn't ever intended to be discriminatory but is. And web pages and documents can be that way. And so we're trying to raise the awareness around this, as well as create a business space, and helping you, whether you're an employee, whether you're a small business, whether you're in a federal agency, state agency, local agency, university, college space, etc., create a more level playing field in a digital world so that our community can be better represented. Now, just some background on this. The unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities is nearly 65%. So there's opportunities to hire individuals with disabilities at a time our governments are not adding to the labor force. We're going to be removing immigrants from the United States. That means we're going to be removing immigrants from the workforce in the United States. And so individuals with disabilities can fill some of those gaps. And so when we talk about a 65% unemployment rate for individuals with disabilities, is there an opportunity here for us if we can create a more level playing field, especially in the digital space? And so I'm looking at this in a positive light for our community. that if we are able to create web pages, digital documents, um, Teams meetings, Zooms meetings, etc., that are more accessible, then we're able to create a better pathway for individuals with disabilities. Now, why are we doing this? For years and years, the world, and specifically the United States, the Western world, looked at disability as an impairment, looked at disability as a problem. And so the medical model of disability and the study of disability in the medical model was, we're going to fix disability. You know, in my case, specifically as a quadruple amputee, no arms and no legs, I would be sitting here now with prosthetics if I had adhered to the medical model of disability, that my quadruple amputation would be, quote, fixed if I were able to have prosthetic arms and limbs. And there's other examples all the way through. But what we have realized in the social model of disability, that it's society and our barriers that are disabling us. And that if we remove some of those barriers, then we can create more independence. And so if you think about what are some of the societal barriers, especially in a digital world, for individuals with disabilities, it can be the fact that there are not accessible documents, web pages, apps, Teams meetings, Zooms meeting, etc., videos, audio. So this is an example of what could we do that creates a better space. If you're watching this on YouTube, there's open captions. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you can't see me right now, or if you're listening to this in a podcast, I am a 55-year-old quadruple amputee white male, brush cut, sitting behind my home desk in my home office, wearing a red Jobsability t-shirt and No Shave November. So you've got some gray beard going on. So these are the things that's an audio description of where I am. That's an example of what we can do in accessibility in a digital world. The open captions, another example of accessibility. And so what we choose to look at is that it's society that's disabling us. And if we remove some of those barriers with adding audio description or adding open captions, you know what, we can create a more universal space. So we've always adhered to the social model of disability at Our Ability Incorporated. And so this is the beginnings of this journey. And so if you think about creating an accessible space for individuals with disabilities, what you're really doing is you're removing some of those barriers in society. The law that is talking about this is Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. Now, I've talked an awful lot in my life about 503. 503 is especially the enhancements of 503 talk about adding individuals with disabilities into the workforce and not being discriminatory in your employment practices in the Rehabilitation Act. And certainly what ended up happening in 2014 was that they put some teeth to that, saying that federal contractors and subcontractors need to be working towards employing individuals with disabilities. Along comes Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. And what 508 did, and it was amended in 1998, Congress amended the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 to require federal agencies to make electronic and information technology accessible to people with disabilities. This was a big move forward. It started to talk about what federal agencies and the trickle down from federal agencies, i.e. where the federal dollars go, must give disabled employees and members of the disabled community public access to information that's comparable access to others. And then eventually what ended up happening in 2017, the Access Board issued a final rule that the updated accessibility requirements covered by 508 were enacted. And so, not to get too technical about it, but 508 really then applies to federal agencies and anybody receiving federal dollars. And this is where it comes back into state agencies, county agencies, parish agencies, city agencies, etc., that receive federal dollars, that now we need to become compliant in digital information. This even trickles down into federal contractors for contracting to make sure that your footprint is accessible. This can Also takes into consideration colleges, community colleges, universities, etc., that receive federal dollars need to make sure that their information is accessible. And so what 508 was started to talk about that language, and the US government took into consideration the web content accessibility guidelines that are part of a series of accessibility guidelines published by the Web Accessibility Initiative of the World Wide Web Consortium. And what WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, what WCAG is primarily intended for is web content for developers, web authoring tools used, web accessibility evaluation tools, and anybody else that wants to or needs to think about the standards for web accessibility, including mobile accessibility. So who does that mean? WCAG is intended for those of you that are putting out a web page at a college, those of you that are updating a web page at a state agency, anybody sending out public PDF at a state agency. Recently, we were asked to take a look at some PDF documents on a New York State, I don't want to out the agency, but a New York State agency. Would we take a look at the documents? There's some 16,000 pages of documents that are inaccessible. So we're talking about what is out there and who should be looking at this. And it's content developers and tool authors and accessibility evaluators, including us, to be thinking about the WCAG standards. Right now we're at 2.2, 2.1, coming soon to 2.2. And I urge you to look up WCAG standards. But here's the question of why WCAG. It's because we need it to be perceivable. We need the information to be perceivable, meaning can I perceive it? Can I grasp it? So is something on a web page that I can access? So an example, again, the PDF document, the web page, is it perceivable? Is it operable? If it's an app, can I navigate it? I'm amputated at the elbows. Can I navigate it if I'm using an app? Is it easily operable for me? If somebody's using a screen reader, is it easily operable for them? Is it understandable? Can the information then be trickled down into the tools and ways that I navigate information? So again, if I'm using a screen reader, is there alt text? Are there headings? Are paragraphs being delineated so that I can understand how to read a document in what order? These are things that we all need to be thinking about as we're building apps, as we're building web pages, as we're considering the information that we not only digest, but then send back out. And then is it robust? Is it big enough? Are fonts big enough? Are colors different enough so that those with limited visual perception can get the information? So this is why WCAG is there, and this is what we think about every day when we build our information, and we also think about when we advise you on what you're doing in your digital footprint. Basic things to be thinking about along the way. Images with alt text. I've mentioned it a couple times. It's really, really important that you have native tags wherever possible. Headings are denoted. Subsections are denoted. Landmarks are identified to help people easily navigate. There's color contrast. There's using accessibility testing tools. If you're building something, make sure it's accessible before it goes out the door. And here's the more important element. Make sure those accessibility testing tools run by organizations like Our Ability are involving people with disabilities early on. And then the second thing, and this is really maybe obvious to us, but maybe not obvious to you, code with accessibility in mind. Don't fix after. Build with accessibility to begin with, because it'll cost you less money down the road. That's really, really important. If you're building a state agency website, talk to us first. Talk to an accessibility expert first. Vet the accessibility expert. One of the things you see on ourability.com, if you come to our website, you're going to see our team page. You're going to read Kartik's bio. You're going to know he's an accessibility expert. That's really important. So code with accessibility in mind, because it becomes very, very important on in your project. and it will cost you less money over time. I finally want to bring up overlays a little bit. A lot of us have used overlays at different times. They're the little widget in the bottom corner that can allow you to sort of temporarily fix your accessibility issues on your website. The way I hearken this is an overlay is temporary. It does not fix an ultimate problem. And here's the secret to overlays. Overlays have some usages, but the over-reliance on overlays is a problem. It's not fixing your code at the beginning. If the overlay breaks, your website breaks. Also, additionally, remember this. An overlay is a temporary solution, and people with disabilities can see temporary solutions. We can navigate temporary solutions for short term, but ultimately overlays are not well liked by the disability community. The last thing you want to do is put up an app, put up a web page, put information out there, and you want to be inclusive to people with disabilities. And if you see an overlay, you'll realize, the disability community anyway will realize, that we weren't thought of at the beginning. We were an afterthought. And so be aware of that. You want to be welcoming at the beginning. The image I want to paint in your head sometimes with overlays is this. Go back to the original curb cuts 30, 40 years ago. Curb cuts that were built in to city design, great. Curb cuts that were not thought of well, had a high grade, or even back 30 years ago when there's a board that was put down so that your wheelchair could navigate, that didn't work. Well, same thing with overlays. That's the image I want you to have. I want you to be building your web pages. I want you to be building your apps and your documents with accessibility in mind at the beginning. And if you do that, you'll be better off. I mentioned that we're WCAG 2.1 right now. We're going to be moving eventually to WCAG 2.2. But where this comes together in the United States anyway is the compliance deadlines. For the first time, the Department of Justice set up a deadline that if you're a state agency, city agency, and you serve more than 50,000 people, that by April 24th, 2026, you need to make sure that your WCAG standards are in line and that you're building with accessibility in mind on any document that goes out the door, any web page, any app. And you're going to see the federal contractors and subcontractors follow suit with these dates as well in time. So if you touch federal dollars, again, you're a college, state agency, town, city, etc., you need to be aware of the fact that by 2026, you need to make sure that all of your digital footprint is accessible. So be thinking about that, and in terms of what you should be thinking about as far as digital accessibility. I put out there on LinkedIn last week, what would people like to hear about? One of our friends at Our Ability put a couple of questions and asked me to talk about digital accessibility. And so this is why we're doing it. We also are thinking about, in our new venture with Syracuse University, what are we going to be doing as we create more entrepreneurs with disability and more opportunities for people with disabilities through Gen AI. We're thinking about how we can really ramp up digital accessibility with our friends at Syracuse University. So we're really excited about it. Kartik and I are thinking about this even today. But we did get some questions on LinkedIn, and so I wanted to share those with you and give you my perspective on the answers. The first question is this: how can average business owners make their websites, their physical spaces, more accommodating? It goes on to say, I realize that there is not one answer, but maybe a conversation around this. Well, business owners should be thinking about their websites and should be thinking about physical spaces as well. How can they be more accommodating? Web pages, again, color contrast, simplicity, alt text, obvious headers are all very helpful to people as they navigate. I'm always a big believer in clean web pages. That's why Our Ability's website externally, and then also once you log into Jobsability to match the jobs, is very clean. The colors are in contrast. The buttons are obvious, so that screen readers and navigation is easy for everybody. That's very important to me and it should be very important to any business out there, especially small businesses. You don't want to turn somebody away. You want to have a very clean site, a very easy site to navigate, and make it obvious. As a matter of fact, we're going to be doing some work for local golf course, which isn't in our norm, but kind of excited to do it. And we're going to be building out their website, and we're going to be sharing this wisdom with them because it's very important. As far as physical spaces go and accommodation, I think we need to make sure that lighting is available, that there's strong lighting, that stairs are identified, that there's a way for people who can't use stairs, such as myself, that it's easily navigable. We want to make sure that there is wide spaces, that those of us that use wheelchairs, that there's enough navigation space in a store, in an office, that it's available to us. If we're parking, we want to make sure that the parking lot's accessible, that there's the standard width and the extra space for loading and unloading a wheelchair. Just yesterday, I was out for watching a football game, and the Uber Eats driver was parking in the load area for the wheelchair parking spot. And it annoys me to no end, because that's not an extra space, and that's not a space for an Uber Eats driver. That's there so that my friends that are in wheelchairs can get in and out of their vehicle. So if you see somebody in that space, those blue lines, diagonal lines, tell them to get out, because what that business is really saying is you're not welcome. So be aware of that. So these are some things that I think about when I think about accessibility, both digitally, but then also even when we had our office at 66 South Pearl Street. Is it easily navigable? Can you get in? Does the elevator work, et cetera, right? These are things that I think about. Then the second question that came out in the LinkedIn is, who can entrepreneurs reach out to for guidance in language, user experience, and digital space? The obvious answer is that's where we're here. That's why our ability is here, but there's others out there. I would urge you, if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking at starting a web page, you're looking at starting out public information, you're going to disperse information, you're going to do social media, be thinking about all these things that I'm saying, alt text on every image. It has another positive benefit to you as well when you build something with accessibility in mind, not just alt text, but paragraphs, headers, subheaders, etc. You'll notice that your SEO goes up, because the more navigable your website is, the more Google will see it, and the more Bing will see it in the search engine. So be aware of that not only does it help accessibility, but it helps your SEO. So yes, there's those of us that are out there that do this work. There's others out there as well that you can find. Just vet them. Again, go to their team pages, check their history, know that they are doing the work properly. And again, be very careful of overlays, because overlays can be a good temporary fix. And we've got some friends in the overlay business, but truthfully, we've decided not to do that. And we're very specific on why we do not want to do that. So be aware of that as you're building your websites, your web pages, and your documentation. Finally, I would say this: one of our goals with our ability is to keep building accessible pathways for documentation, because we all email documents out all the time, whether they be through PDFs or Word documents or PowerPoints or Excel spreadsheets or whatever. We are thinking about accessibility at the beginning. And so we're building, through our generative AI systems, better compliance with their documentation. So if you want more information about that, you're a university, you're a school, whoever you are, reach out to us, and we'd be happy to work with you. I'm excited to talk about this topic. Obviously, it's a topic that we care about very deeply with our ability. It is part of the future of disability. And I'll go back to what I was thinking about at the beginning, and that's this. We don't really know the world that we're coming to in the disability space. We just don't. But the digital arena is not going to go away, and it's only going to expand. Even in the Trump era and post-Trump, we're not going to go away. We're going to continue to have Teams meetings, Zooms meetings. We're going to continue to use PayPal and Venmo. We're going to continue to send documents out, and we don't even know the forms of those documents are going to take in years to come. But know this, that while we exist at our ability and while we work with Syracuse University, we're going to be building a better digital pathway. And it's really important so that we can build more entrepreneurs that are people with disabilities, and so that we can build more employment for people with disabilities, so that we can create more economic empowerment. We want to raise the income level of people with disabilities. We're 2.5 times more likely to be in the poverty level. We don't want that. And so if we can create a level playing field in the digital space for our community, then we can create more economic empowerment.